Hey everyone, Ashley Mailloux, Scott Shapiro here, taking a look at some of the graded stakes action this Saturday at Kentucky Downs. On Thursday, their meet gets underway, and then Saturday, part of the long holiday weekend, they have plenty of stakes action to get to. We'll have several previews here on the DRF YouTube page. But with that in mind, Labor Day, Kentucky Downs, we do have a couple of promos right now here at DRF, and kicking it off with Labor Day, can save 15% on past performances, handicapping products, and more by using the code LBD15OFF, 15 off there. Great way to utilize it with all of the racing across the country and really across the continent. And also mention it, we're going to be previewing Kentucky Downs here. They kick off on Thursday, 7 days of racing. There's a package here available at DRF, which is the Kentucky Downs package, all access PPs and more. For the 7 cards, you can see only $20 total. So great way to take advantage of these, Scott. And got to do your homework early as we'll look at this Grade 2 Kentucky Downs turf sprint at 6 furlongs. It's a big field. Get the magnifying glass out. You can see 15 were entered in here, and it's a really challenging race. The morning line suggests that, but once you start digging through the form, it's easy to see it's going to be very competitive.
Yes, it's definitely like Kentucky Downs, big field sizes, running for those big purses. One of the graded stakes here for us. And yeah, very difficult field to sort through. You mentioned getting an early start. These are not the kinds of races where you want to pick up the form or the program 5 minutes before post and think that you have any shot. You really got to do some work.
We'll take a look at the Timeform US pace projection here. And in terms of what we might see in terms of this pace is a fast one. Nobles towards the outside of the gate here could be involved. Bear River, Pipsy going to tackle the boys. I agree with this. And I think the other thing to point out here, Scott, is also the configuration. If you're not familiar with Kentucky Downs, look at the course. It's not your traditional oval. And that's why on these cards now, we're going to see some European invaders give their kind of runners a chance here with the unique configuration.
Yes, the closest thing maybe I could come up with in the States is the downhill course at Santa Anita, but even that is not it. It's just a unique configuration, is kind of to your point, and maybe more so that there's kind of configurations like that over in Europe, to your other point. So, I think a lot of these full fields are going to show up as fast paces. This one almost certainly will be because of the number of horses in here. But there are more like stalkers than there are just straight need the lead types, I think.
Let's dive right into it here with a big field ahead of us. The number 1 implementation for Saffie Joseph Jr., Ramsey Silks in the spotlight. We go back to, I guess, 2 turf races ago, pretty far down the page, going to September of 2024. But I think when you look at this performance, at least how I look at it, Scott, this is a horse that kind of relished this unique configuration, was going a tad bit longer. And I understand faced quote unquote lesser competition, but the meet is ferocious with such big purse money on the line. These sorts of races are more competitive than, say, the same condition elsewhere.
Without question. And 2 for 2 over this course. Took advantage of a really good trip in that race last year. Like you said, only 2 turf races on the page, really. And the other one was an underwhelming effort at Aqueduct. But this horse could get a really good trip again, much like last time. You mentioned the class hike here compared to what he faced last year. But the configuration success puts him at least in the mix, especially with that inside draw.
The 2, Howard Wolowitz, we'll take a look at one of his performances. Now, his last 2 haven't been necessarily either here stateside or they haven't been on the turf. And as you kind of go back to his races last September at Kentucky Downs, this is a huge grade 1 win from him. In terms of trip, we can see at least at Turfway and Gulfstream Park on synthetic or Tapeta, he's a little bit more forward, but he's been comfortable with a target or a few targets in front of him and makes a late run. And this was a pretty game performance.
Yeah, he's the one to beat in here. He's done, when he runs his race, he wins pretty much. He's 3 for 7. His last 2 disappointing efforts, if you will, were a 9th by 3 lengths in the Breeders' Cup and then going to Saudi, like you mentioned. The big question here is what price are you willing to accept? He hasn't raced since February. He looks like, he's firing bullets at Saratoga, but I don't know how that will equate to this effort here over the turf at Kentucky Downs.
You bring up a great point about the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. Also have to remember, depending where that is, the distance that it's run at. 5/8, maybe not his best game. The number 3 one-timer up next. One of a couple in here for trainer Larry Ravelli. And, you go down the page. This is a gelding. He shows up. I just don't know if he's this level, Scott. He hasn't shown enough in those most recent to suggest that in a $2 million race that he'd be the horse that I'd pick.
He's up against it. You go back to August of 2023, he ran a 104 buyer And he's been regressing ever since. If you look at numbers in any metric, particularly buyers, he just hasn't been the same horse. I think horses might run too big at times. Maybe he did. He has hit the board in 3 or 4 over the surface, though.
The number 4, Arzak, he needs to get back on track. I feel like he just isn't the same horse that he once was. And we obviously know he's a multiple graded stakes winner. At his best, he could be competitive here. A horse that you go back to just over a year ago, he had over 100 plus buyer. It's just, to me, he's not doing enough right now, Scott. And I don't know how Kentucky Downs is going to fare for him because he does have 35 starts. Only one of them was here. You have to go down the page to find it. I don't know what to make of him.
Yeah, he doesn't appear to be that same $1 million earner that we know and fired kind of regularly from off the pace for Michael Trombetta. The one thing I can say in his favor, he should get a much better race shape. Last time in that preview turf sprint at Ellis, it was 1-2 around the track. Bear River, who we'll talk about next, and Coppola. And that was because Joe Shiesty, another speed who looked like he was going to press those or be on the lead, missed the break.
And speaking of the 5, Bear River, curious to get your thoughts on the performance. He beats Coppola, which, if you followed, is extremely quick when you look at some of the splits that he has set, whether it be there or anywhere down in Florida. I believe he was at Pimlico. I thought it was actually a really good effort from Bear River to be able to get past him. For him, it was an increase in terms of his figures, now a career best of a 95. I've seen worse 20-1 shots that, I can't really make for a case for, but to me, he's improving. Is he this level? Another one, it's kind of the story here with several of these horses. I don't know how they're going to fare here.
Well, the one thing kind of to piggyback on what you're saying is he's a 4-year-old, third off the layoff. We kind of talked about one-timer and Arzak seeing better days. So he's coming into the race. And that's kind of, if I'm going to bet long shots, I'd rather have horses kind of moving up and in good form than hoping that they can get back to an effort that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But I do think 6 furlongs could be pressing it. And I think he probably needs the lead to be at his best. And we'll see if he makes it. There's some speed around him.
Now, we didn't talk about it in the time form US pace projection, but the LP late pace flag was and is attached to the number 6, Kadem here, who in terms of his last 2, he hasn't fired really yet in 2025. But when you go down the page, he's been racing internationally. He does have a start, though, at Kentucky Downs. They decided to make this trip last year. I thought he ran extremely well in this race. He had the pace develop in front of him, Scott, and kind of looking at the projector, it's very likely that could happen again. And I know he's a 9-year-old, maybe not firing the best of races, but he's a horse that I think you look at some of his races, he's very classy against his bunch.
Yeah, this is definitely a class drop, and he showed that it meant something last year in this race. And to your point about, coming into the race not in the best of form, he was in worse form last year, at least in terms of finishes. I didn't go back and watch those races and see, if there's good reason for the poor performances. He's a 9-year-old. It's tough for me at 4-1 in this field to get excited about that, but he should be saving ground much like he did last year. He's going to get out of the gate slow, though, most likely.
We'll move to the number 7, Arrest Me Red here for Lail Stables, Wesley Ward, a horse that, has a good resume here, Scott. And I think, when you think Wesley, you think sprinters. Sometimes you think they have to go to the front. Not all of them do. We've seen him have horses that can rally from off of it. And they've tried different things with Arrest Me Red. I almost feel like he's better sitting just off of that and combining that thought process with maybe a fast pace. He could get the right race flow here.
Could get the right trip. I don't think he's fast enough to even make the lead, most likely against this group. You do see that his 2 most recent wins, including a win over this turf course, came in wire-to-wire fashion, but I don't think he needs that trip to win. 10 for 26 in his career. This horse has beat me many times in my life. He's probably going to beat me again here, but he certainly makes some sense. He's 3 for 6 at the distance as well.
The 8, Air Force Red. I've always been a big fan of his, Scotty. He always fires races. He's now 7 years old. He does have the 1 win so far in the calendar year, but a horse that rarely leaves California. Go down the past performances. Unless my eyes are deceiving me, it's happened once when he went to Belmont. He actually ran, poorly there, but he kind of had some issues in the race. So they decided to ship him again. Obviously, the purse money is going to draw some attention. Curious to get your thoughts on him and if this cutback now is going to help him with the different configuration.
I hope so. I think he's one of the more intriguing runners in here. Maybe to get a somewhat similar trip than you just described, where with the Rest Me Red, where it would be most beneficial for him. The last race for Air Force Red, he was three wide that race, made a three wide move, I should say. Then the rails were out significantly that day at Del Mar. That's not the place you want to be. The horses that succeed, generally speaking, almost always, including this race, are the ones saving ground. I think the cutback in the presence of Jose Ortiz makes him interesting, and you would expect him to get overlooked in the wagering a little bit, since, like you said, Ashley doesn't really step out of California all that often.
This one for David Jacobson. If you followed the racing last Friday, Charlestown banishing with a big win for the Jacobson barn. Now Durante's going to switch back to the turf. He only raced on the grass a handful of times last year, and look at his career record. He's just 1 for 10 in terms of wins, 2 in the money finishes, and he's a tough read for me. I guess they've maybe been a little disappointing with his last few, and they're deciding to regroup, Scott. But I mentioned the name Banishing. His stablemate defeated him last time out. He's a really tough read for me in this race just because of his buyers. They're very low on the turf compared to the others.
He looks like he's up against it, and he's tough to get to. Like you said, I mean, the last couple of efforts were a little bit underwhelming, albeit against good competition over the dirt in Kentucky. David Jacobson's been on fire in Kentucky. If I'm looking for reasons to use a long shot, he's 9 for 37 with a 230 ROI over the last 60 days. But I can almost look at that as a negative as well, since this horse was not amongst those to run first or second during that hot streak.
The 10, Pipsy, we'll talk about this 4-year-old filly. We'll actually show one of her efforts. In terms of what she's been able to do, she has a very impressive resume. She's almost banked $500,000 now in 10 career starts. And we're going to go to the race 2 back in the Intercontinental, where she ends up, going to the front. It looks like she's going to get past, and she sort of does. And then she finds another gear and is able to hang on. How do you stack her up now against her male rivals?
Well, it's interesting that she could go to the to take on the females, but I think that extra half furlong in the ladies' turf sprint probably Will Walton, probably knowing that, probably stretches her a little more than he would like, is my guess. I'm a big fan of this filly. She beat Future Is Now, who turned the tables in the Caress. She's serious as well, and it was pretty much a tale of two trips. When she got out of the gate well and went to the front and made things easy on herself, she had a little bit left late. Last time she was beaten to the front. I think she gets a good trip from the outside. I'm looking forward to seeing her taking on the boys.
The 11, Nobles here for Larry Ravelli. We talked about his other runner in the field. This one was third in the preview that we talked about, where horses that were forward, Bear River, Coppola, they flip-flopped order, but they were 1-2. And thought he got the right trip that he needed. I know he has been able to win on the lead. He did that in his win this year, 3 starts back at Churchill. But again, we talk about trip. I think he gets a very similar trip to Arrest Me Red in here.
Yeah, the pace projector has him on the lead. He hasn't been breaking all that well of late. He's over 2 over the surface. He's had a really good career. He's almost at the $1.8 million mark for a turf sprinter. Obviously, some big races help that, but I think I'm a little bit against him here, even with Tyler Gaffalione jumping on board. If he's up and on the lead and breaks well, then he's going to be dangerous. But that effort 2 back at Presque Isle, I know it was over the all weather, but he lost at 1-2 with no excuse.
Yeah, it's tough when you go through his past performances. He's not making the lead sometimes when they're going sub 44. Even though he did that 3 starts back, historically, it's not always the case for Noble. So we'll see what he does here. The number 12, Charcoal, up next. 7th in the preview that we've already talked about, but prior to that was second behind Coppola and was able to close from off of it. He's hit or miss. I feel like you look at his past performances, you see a huge second in the Woodford, grade 2. Go down the page. He's inconsistent, but I could see maybe making a case for him in terms of the bottom of the exotics.
I've tried to make a case for this horse a number of times. Once it was successful. Last time it wasn't. Spoke about the race shape. Didn't get Joe Shiesty to be a part of things. Didn't get the setup. I think, though, Ellis Park, the 5.5 furlongs are what this horse likes best. I think this level at 6 furlongs is kind of stretching him.
And that's the main body of the field, the 13, 14, and 15. They're all big prices on the morning line, 30-1, 20-1, and 20-1, respectively. So in the event of any scratches, they would have the opportunity to draw in. I don't know if they really would affect my handicapping and selections. All right, we'll move to top selections now for Scott and I. And this is what I sort of expected would happen. It's just such a wide open event. A lot of cases to be made. It's going to depend on race flow. And Scott, for your top pick, you'll go to the 8, Air Force Red, who's going to ship for what, the second time in his career outside of California, but maybe the change of scenery will get him back on track.
I'm hopeful they're confident in the spot, the cutback, the trip here. They get Jose Ortiz, and hopefully we get over 10-1 in this spot. But maybe I'm crazy for leaving off your top pick, especially with the class coming over from Europe.
We'll see. He's a 9-year-old. His 2 races so far this year, they've been disappointing, but obviously his run, Kadem's last year at Kentucky Downs, was a good runner-up finish. So I will use him in here. We'll both use Howard Wolowitz in the second spot. So 8-2, 10-4 for Scott, 6-2, 1-11 for me. A great graded 2 event this Saturday at Kentucky Downs. Good luck.